in particular is a book I have quite a strange first impression attached to. My memory of how I first came across this book is, well, a little odd, to say the least. When I was young, my mom would read the Goosebumps books to me quite often. One time we had just moved into a new house. My Aunt Joni had brought me to Walmart. I picked out a Goosebumps book that I didn't recognize and didn't have yet. I liked the cover of it. It was Welcome to Dead House. I brought it home and my mom said, "Well, look at this one. It's about a haunted new house." The house in Fort Madison. I believe in the paranormal in real life, but one of the most conflicting parts of my life on that opinion came from that house. Many people told my mom the house was haunted. To this day, she still claims it is. She says she heard laughing from children that weren't there and old music boxes. But my experience came from one day when I was sitting in my room alone. I saw the silhouette of a man staring down at me through my window. Only problem was my window was on the top floor. My room was in the upper level of the house. I ran and got my mom and her current boyfriend of the time. They came in and it was gone. They tried to comfort me and say no one was there. But I still remember what I saw. Still gives me chills when I think back to that day. Hello and welcome to the Goosebumps review series on GoogleBumps. Today we're going to be reviewing Welcome to Dead House. And by the way, the story at the beginning, completely true. Still freaks me out to this day. But then again, I had overactive imagination as a kid, and I still do. Clearly. I'm reviewing this in front of my shelf with all my Ghostbusters and Goosebumps and Gremlins stuff on it. But at the top, it's all Goosebumps. It's my pride and joy. I call it my RL shrine. Yeah. So. Ooh, but that story still scares me, so. Wait a minute. I know what I mean. There we go. Blanket and pillow always makes everything better. So, without further ado, we will be reviewing Goosebumps number 1, Welcome to Dead House by R.L. Stine. Enjoy the review. First of all, I just want to acknowledge how amazing this cover is. One of the big draws to the Goosebumps series is the great covers, and many people review them in their series, and this one will be no different, because this cover is so great, and I'll review all the other covers for the books that I do. And I must say, this one in particular I really like. It's a 10 out of 10. Now, when I was littler, I actually had the reprint cover, and even though it's a worse cover, I just have a little bit of nostalgia built up for it. But this one is great. I'll turn on the light so you can see better. The color is great. The overall presentation is great. Everything's great about it. The cover has the stairs, stretching out so it looks like you're walking up there. You'll notice one of the steps is broken. I jokingly say that that's the same step from the show Modern Family. You can notice that it's an orange glow coming out of the house, and in the window there's actually one of the ghosts from the book, even though it looks more like a zombie, and sometimes in the book they do appear more zombie-like, and that's how they were in the TV series. There's a creepy tree and stars, and the tagline is, "It will just kill you." I like the purple around the book, and overall it's just a pretty good cover. It's off introducing us to some of our core main characters. There's Amanda. She's the main character, and the book takes place mostly through her point of view. Josh, the little brother, who spends the good majority of the beginning of this book being a pain. Their mom and dad, Yeah, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And Mr. Dawes, the real estate agent. So our family here is moving into their new house that Mr. Dawes is introducing him to, in a place called Dark Falls. Right off the bat, the book isn't being very subtle, and really R.L. Stine didn't have to write it to be, because as soon as you read the book, you probably know what you're getting yourself into. But I could see how this kind of thing would bother people. But it's nothing like outside of what you'd see in a pulpy 1950s horror movie, which is kind of what Goosebumps is. Goosebumps is kind of like the Twilight Zone, where it's an anthology series that follow these little horror stories. So, like I said, the lack of subtlety calling the town Dark Falls doesn't really bother me as much as it would some people. So the book explains that for Josh and Amanda's entire life, they've lived in this little apartment. And when their father got a letter from an uncle that none of them remembered who died, saying that they were left the house, the father jumped at the opportunity. The book explains that the whole family's having money problems, kind of giving it more of a realistic feel than your typical Goosebumps book. And the fact that he's happily going to quit his office job, that way he can continue his writing career. Since the lack of any sort of house payment gives him an opportunity to not have to worry about many expenses while he tries to start up. The book also has Amanda noting that when she gets closer to the house, even though it's summer, the closer she gets to it, the colder it is, building up its supernatural presence along with the rest of the town. We also have Amanda explaining in the book that although neither her or her brother wanted to move, she is definitely taking it far better than her brother does, with her brother mostly, like I said earlier, being a pain, dragging his father by his arm, trying to get him to come back in the car so they can go back to their old house. Yeah, so this is just shows the differences between the two characters. It's more generic boy and generic girl, the girl being more lightheaded and being able to think more rationally. But, the book works in that manner because in a Goosebumps book, you typically don't come for the characters unless you're reading a book like The Haunted Mask. You just come for basically the monster action and the horror throughout the books. So, although I would like more characters like Carly Beth Cardwell, which are very realistic in a Goosebumps book, it doesn't bother me that much. And me being able to overlook little problems like this is why to this day I'm still a fan of the series. The book also stops to have the fact that their dog is barking in the car. Amanda explains that he's usually very well behaved, but today he's yipping and barking. Josh goes and gets him, and the dog immediately goes and starts sniffing and barking at Mr. Dawes. Mr. Dawes explains it's probably just because he's been at other houses with other dogs lately. Now, this is the part in the book I kind of have a problem with, because if you've read supernatural stories, you know right off the bat what this means. I will admit this never really bothered me when I was littler, because this is the first time I was introduced to this particular cliche, but now that I'm older, this does bother me because the book is extremely obvious about it and hides nothing about the fact that Mr. Dawes is going to be revealed to be a ghost later, and takes away a little bit from the overall mystery of the book. The book then has a little bit of more Josh complaining about how he doesn't want to go into a house he didn't want to move to in the first place. The father gets kind of mad at him, and the mother tries to comfort him and bring him in, saying that he gets to pick out his own room if he comes in the house. But he then refuses to go inside and says he'd rather stay out with the dog, leaving just Amanda to go inside, because even though she's kind of sad about having to leave her friends, she's not putting up a fight as much as Josh is. But then some of this anxiety is actually lifted when she goes through the house and finds it to be pretty neat. Living in a small apartment, I can see just the idea of living in your own house to be pretty cool. In fact, she goes through her new room, taking mental notes of where she's going to put her bed, her shelves, all of her posters. And then she notices a mysterious boy in her room. The boy's there for a second, and then mysteriously vanishes. She then thinks she was just seeing things, and leaves. And then outside, Josh starts freaking out. The whole family and Mr. Dolls is out there. He explains that Petey has ran off, and that's the book's chapter closing. And in my opinion, this is one of the better cliffhanger chapters in a Goosebumps book. The Goosebumps book could have easily chose to make the boy standing there the cliffhanger chapter, and then end the chapter and start up the next one revealing that he has just vanished. But the fact that the dog ran off to a different part of town, I think, is a better cliffhanger chapter, and very commendable in the fact that it keeps in line with the main idea of this book and some of the other books in the series. And that is to specifically prey on a kid's fears. Even though me and many other older people still read these books and love them, the book is solely aiming to scare children. A lot of the books will take a child like fear. Kind of like how The Girl Who Cried Monster and Stay Out of the Basement take the idea that adult will be the main monster for that book. Other Goosebumps books just prey on specific phobias, like Night of the Living Dummy or The Haunted Mask. And even just little things to make people scared, like getting their picture taken, is also covered in like Say Cheese and Die. Even though this theme got sorta dropped later on, there's a lot of them that still carry it. And the idea of a ghost, even though some people do believe in the paranormal, and I can't change your mind on that, they will all agree that more people have experienced, especially kids, the idea of your dog running away and the fear that it will get hit by a car or attacked by another animal. And because of this, it makes a more realistic cliffhanger. A lot of people have problems with the fact that Goosebumps constantly has these cliffhanger scares. And yeah, I kind of do when I have a book and I'm reading it, and it'll have something like, and then I saw a snarling monster staring back at me. And then I read, and the next page said, oh wait, no, it was a pile of dirty laundry. But us Goosebumps fans will always have the idea that the cliffhanger scare for the first Goosebumps book, the first chapter ending, was actually a pretty clever one. In chapter 2, there's really nothing notable. But by the way, I forgot that Josh also goes missing too, which was stupid on my part for forgetting that while I was filming the video. But it really only strengthens my argument about how good the first chapter of the book is, but that's more Stein's win than my win. But the only thing really notable in the second chapter is the fact that Mr. Dolls puts on a wide-brimmed cowboy hat, and the father says, that's some hat, and he says, yeah, it keeps the sun out of my eyes, which is foreshadowing. And the fact that even though this Goosebumps book, for its first chapter of the closing of the series, has one of the best cliffhangers, the second chapter has one of the dumbest cliffhangers. When they go through, okay, so basically a chapter, like I said, is nothing noble. They just get in Mr. Doll's car and go looking for Josh and the dog Petey. But when they find Josh, he's in the cemetery, and Amanda says, oh my gosh, I'm so scared, something's chasing him. Something is chasing Josh. And then the second chapter is, oh wait, never mind, he's chasing the dog. Yeah, so, you know. So then chapter 3 is Josh is chasing the dog. He gets tired and the dad goes after him and catches him. A little bit more foreshadowing with them asking Mr. Dolls where his first name came from and him joking about how he didn't really know where it came from. and maybe his parents didn't know how to spell Charles. But then the book jump cuts to a few weeks later, and the good majority of the third chapter is just them before and they're moving and the car ride to their new house, because they don't move into the house right away. And the book does actually a pretty good job of building up the anxiety. Like I said, this book's specific goal is to use the fear of moving to a new house against the reader. And the book has Amanda talking to her best friend before she moves, and even crying towards the end of that. Her just laying in her bed looking at the ceiling for an hour. And then the whole family snapping at each other during breakfast and on the car ride because they're so worked up. And like I said, there's actually a legitimate good ending to this one, or to this chapter. Not as good as the first chapter, not as bad as the second chapter. Just pretty decent. Amanda looks up and sees the same boy in her window from the beginning of the book. And that's how chapter 3 ends. Chapter 4 is the first time in this book, and since this is the first Goosebumps book, the first time in a Goosebumps book, that Stein tried to be suspenseful for an entire chapter. And it actually kind of works. They get in the house, and because the painters have turned off the lights, or some reason, they don't give an explanation, at least not at this point, the lights aren't working. The family is off exploring the house, and Amanda tries to tell the mother what she saw. The mother doesn't believe it, and she gets mad and goes up the stairs. We get a bit where it's raining and it's dark and she's going up the stairs. She makes it to the top, eventually, and goes down the hall to her door, the window where she would have saw him. She knocks on the door, but is then grabbed by her shoulder by who she thinks is the boy. It's actually a pretty cool chapter. Everything from the lights being out to the raindrops on the house builds up the suspense. I think Stein did a really good job. And you don't get a conclusion for the last chapter just yet until the end of this, or the next chapter at this point. I like it, these sort of cliffhangers where you don't get a conclusion right away, and I wish Goosebumps would do more of that. Because at the end of chapter 4, you still don't get a conclusion for at the end of chapter 4, you don't get explanation to where the boy was in chapter 3. And you have to read on to chapter 5 to figure it out. This is the kind of thing where Goosebumps really can keep you invested in the book. Chapter 5 then reveals it wasn't the dark, strange boy at all, but actually Josh, just trying to scare Amanda. She then goes into her room to see what's going on when she hears what she thinks is whispering, but notices that Josh is really scared of the whispering. She then finds it was just the window making the noise because the painters must have left it up, and hears Josh calling for her. She then decides to get him back by hiding in the closet. When Josh comes in, she jumps out and screams as loud as she can, scaring the pants off of him. He runs out of the room, and then Petey comes in and starts nervously licking Amanda's face. The dog is scared, and the chapter ends rather than on just a true blue cliffhanger, just an ominous note that the house is going to be fun to stay in. The book then has Amanda in bed. She wakes up because the curtains are flapping and she thinks it's whispering, but she goes to close the window so the curtains will stop flapping, and finds out that even though the window's shut, the curtains are flapping. She then goes back to bed and has a dream, and the dream is her family have become cannibalistic skeletons eating bones while her best friend slams on the door trying to get into the house to see her. Yeah, very seldom is there a moment in a Goosebumps book where I can still acknowledge it is legitimately disturbing, and this is one of them. Chapter 7 starts out with them eating breakfast. Amanda tells about how the curtains were flapping, and the dad said that the window probably just has a draft or something. Josh asks what they're gonna do today, and the parents explain that him and Amanda are gonna go explore the town while they unpack the boxes. Amanda runs upstairs to get changed, but stops in the stairway when she sees a girl staring down at her this time that she doesn't recognize. And that's the end of chapter 7. And that's the first 7 chapters of Welcome to Dead House reviewed. I'm going to stop the video now and split this into another 2 parts, since this video is already 20 minutes. There'll be part 2, which will be the next 7 chapters, and then part 3, which will be the conclusion. And I hope you liked this video on GoogleBumps. But since I don't want to call myself GoogleBumps in these videos, and I can't call myself Super Nerdageddon on these Goosebumps videos, since that's my other YouTube channel for what's going to be now just everything besides Goosebumps, I need a new name. This sounds super cringy, but how about R.L. Sanderson? Yep, that's what I'll call myself in these videos. Yeah, you can cringe if you want. Well, till next time. Interestingly enough, while filming this review, I've found that they put out the seasonal candles in my Walmart. This one is pumpkin scented. And for my first Goosebumps review on GoogleBumps, I will be lighting the ceremonial Goosebumps pumpkin candle.
Beware, you're in for a scare.